Ah, that's better. So Sadio Mané, Made in Senegal, is a classic rags to riches film as I saw it, about this great West African footballer who rises from his humble beginnings in rural Senegal to become a global superstar at Liverpool Football Club. Immediately, I was immersed in kind of familiar sports speak. Mané says he's born to be a footballer, for example. He says right away it's a dream to make it as a pro as a young boy. He's willing to sacrifice to succeed. Mané is also interesting in the way he's used in the film as both the subject and the narrator, particularly in the first half, as he speaks in French from the comfort of his living room couch. Overall, I mostly liked how the film used a mix of on camera interviews with family members, with friends, coaches, and others. I was less enamored with the graphic novel like illustrations that were interspersed in the film, but those were interesting nevertheless. And I think everyone appreciated the selected highlights from Mané's career that really helped to drive the story forward. The structure of the film is interesting because it's really non-linear. It goes back and forth in time. It begins in Bambali, Casamance, in southern Senegal, where Mané grew up around the corner from the dusty village pitch. He, of course, falls in love with the game and comes to understand it as pretty much the only way to avoid spending his life toiling in the fields for his family. But suddenly, Mané is now in his spectacularly luxurious summer crib that he maintains in Spain. He's swimming in the gorgeous pool, looks out at the sea, and generally, this whole sequence projects a feel of great wealth, comfort, and success. It is here that we meet also Bjorn Bezemer, his very white European agent, who in the film, in his basically his first act, is dutifully cooking Mané a tasty breakfast. So big, in fact, that Mané says, I can't eat all of this. White serving black. Spain is also where Liverpool hold preseason camp, and we have that brief sequence of them training before the build-up suddenly to the return leg of the famous Champions League final in the spring of 2019 against Barcelona. And in that legendary game, the Reds come back from 3 goals down to win 4-0 and qualify for the Champions League final. In a nod to Liverpool's technical sponsor, there's an awkward moment and transition where the film's rhythm, I think, is kind of paused temporarily by the photo shoot that Mané is called in to do for New Balance. Thankfully, it's brief. And then here the film makes an unexpected move back in time, having built up all this momentum towards the Champions League final, a story that most viewers probably know well. We're transported back to his home village of Bambali in 2008. Here we learn about his childhood nickname, Balomboa, or Ball Wizard. And it's also arguably where the most revealing storytelling takes place, both in terms of the camera work on site, but also the interviews. We learn about the devastating loss of his father when he was just 7, and that his family is devoutly Muslim, with many imams in the male line. It is a family that values education above all else. So when Mané, as a youth, understands that he doesn't have support for chasing his dream of becoming a professional player, he quite literally elopes under cover of darkness. He embarks on a long, treacherous journey north through the Gambia to Dakar. His family is furious and eventually retrieves him, forcing basically Mané to return to school. Once he completes his schooling, however, he's allowed to return to Dakar, where he enters the Generation Foot Academy, directed by Madi Touré. And here the story is familiar in terms of those African players who've succeeded in migrating to Europe and playing professionally. Predictably, Mané immediately impresses not only his coaches, but a scout from Metz in France, scoring 4 goals in his first training match, showing off his skill, his discipline, but also his hard work and bonhomie. He gets his big break, he signs a contract with Metz, and there He experiences culture shock and unfortunately has a sports hernia injury that cuts his season short. He has surgery and he returns the next season stronger than ever. Here's the hero overcoming challenges. He then plays for Senegal in the 2012 London Olympics, and it is a moment in which the film records his patriotic pride, something it's going to come back to at the end. The story moves quickly here. He's off to Red Bull Salzburg in Austria and then Southampton in the English Premier League. He plays against Liverpool for Southampton and comes off the bench to score 2 goals, impressing Jurgen Klopp, who then signs him for the 2016-2017 season. We get very little about those 4 or 5 years in between. But it is at Liverpool, of course, that Mané strikes gold, and the film now returns to the 2019 Champions League final against Spurs in Madrid, giving the film an opportunity to show Mané at his glorious, successful best. In a nice touch, the film doesn't end on a predictably celebratory note. Rather, it follows Mané back to Senegal, where he prepares for the Africa Cup of Nations. There are beautiful scenes in this part of the film of Mané with his extended family in Dakar and his kind of prodigal son return to Bambali, where he built a school and is also planning to open a hospital. A nice nod to his social responsibility. The closing segment does really well to go beyond Mané as kind of the celebrity athlete, a two-dimensional celebrity athlete. It shows the importance of family and Islam to who he is as a person. The film basically ends with Senegal's painful 1-0 defeat to Algeria in the Africa Cup of Nations final, courtesy of a ridiculously lucky deflected shot from downtown Cairo. And the message we seem to be left with is not really all that subtle. Losing is part of sport. And the heroic ones, like Sadio Mané, use those hard lessons as motivation to pursue victory and to win, again and again. All in all, an enjoyable film, I think, and one that I'll definitely assign in my global soccer course. Among its few shortcomings, I would highlight the complete absence of politics. There's only one passing reference in the film that I noticed to rebels in Casamance towards the end, which seems to reinforce the fallacy that sports and politics do not intersect. I was also left wanting to know a lot more about Sadio Mané's personal life, particularly abroad. What are his interests outside of football? Does he have any? What kind of relationships does he have outside of the game? But having just watched the first 2 episodes of ESPN's The Last Dance series about Michael Jordan's final season with the Chicago Bulls, maybe that would be asking too much of a commercial sports film.